There's a bunch of crazy stories written by the Brothers Grimm. And now you're gonna learn all about them, listening to the Brothers Grimm.
Students and scholars, friends and relations, welcome to another delightful edition of the Brothers Dim podcast. My name is Phil.
My name is Mike.
And today we have a very special guest, an educator for over a decade, and just finished her first year as a librarian in a high school in the Bronx. And in addition to that, has managed to find the time to go to over 40 Guster shows. And if I understand Guster fans, that's a normal thing for Guster fans to do. But Guster aside, just for a minute, I would like to extend a very warm Brothers Dim welcome to our very good friend, Sasha.
Smoking mirrors and crystal balls and red alerts, and all because the king who hides behind the pawns. I can see what's really going on. I can see what's really going on.
I told Amanda about the Guster thing, and she laughed, and I ran right up after you sent me the text to tell her about it, and she said, I knew I liked that lady for a reason. And she seemed to recall, and I think I remember this too, but she seemed to recall that Guster was big into sending out invitations to people on their fan list, whereby you could be the fan coordinator at your college or high school.
So I was actually a Guster rep when I was in high school and college. Yeah. So
That's awesome.
My Instagram username is still my Guster rep name, but with my birth date after it.
Oh boy.
I worked with
I sold CDs in high school and put up posters in college and got to go to concerts for free. It was great.
Oh yeah.
No, I was gonna say I worked with a huge Guster fan. Like it seems like a do or die kind of thing.
Yeah, it's kind of all in. It's a big community. It's really lovely. But yeah, my 40 something shows is nothing compared to some of my friends who my one friend Viv, she went to college with them. So she is
boy.
the original Guster fan.
Where did they go to college? Because I feel like my friends.
Tough.
Okay, I might be confusing it
Yeah.
with my wife then.
You're
wife went
confusing the
nuts.
band Guster with your wife?
No, I'm confusing my wife with my friend Allie. I think Mo. So my wife Mo. I think.
We won't tell your wife.
Wait a minute. Is Mo okay with this, or does this happen often?
I might have to ask her about it later. It was just the Tufts and Guster thing. Because my wife remembers Guster when she was at Tufts. Not a fan.
Okay.
And we'll tell you.
Yeah. That doesn't surprise me that she's not a fan.
Yeah, she's of particular tastes.
Yeah, I've gone dancing with your wife, and I know that her tastes trend towards goth industrial, as I recall.
Yeah, then Guster would not be her scene.
Okay, so today, in addition to talking about Guster, but probably not too much more Guster, we will be talking about story number 7 from the Brothers Grimm, The Good Bargain, an anti-Semitic fairy tale, which was added to the second edition. One of the two known super anti-Semitic ones, where they actually straight up say, like, anyways, and then we met a Jew, and here's what the Jew did. And
it involved money.
It did involve
Always.
money. You know what it involved?
Always.
Which we will talk about in a little bit, is usury. But we felt, in order to be more inclusive, maybe find someone who was Jewish, who happened to be friends with us, that could. I don't even know. I don't know what I can't.
I'm here. I'm here to serve my role as the token Jew. It's great.
Okay. I had
Not
asked
so much token as I think it's just better than the two of us non-Jewish folks.
Yeah, so
talking about this being problematic.
So here we go. Without further ado, I will read through the plot. Sasha, if you feel like interrupting at any point, feel free to,
Okay.
as we do. Story 7, The Good Bargain. Peasant goes to market with his cow and sold her for 7 talers, which we've recently discovered is some German currency. I'm gonna stop right away.
I was gonna say I did some research on this because I was like, what the hell is this?
I emailed a woman who's the professor of German folklore at Harvard.
Nice.
Wow.
I have not heard back from her.
I was like, wow, and she emailed back?
No.
Okay.
But I emailed her. to ask her.
Great.
I was like, is this a
mean,
good
she'd
deal?
be the person to ask. Yeah.
I don't
Yeah.
know. I don't know if you're just, I don't go to Harvard, but I don't know if you can just,
You just gotta ask.
yeah, you got to ask.
Yeah.
But I asked this person. Anyway, so we don't know if, I don't know how much 7 tailors is, but so,
Well, it's 24 groschen per tailor, obviously.
that we know. And we get into that in a little bit later.
Also, I
Yeah.
found out that taller and dollar have the same etymological root, which had
Sure.
not
Yeah.
occurred to me, but yeah.
And that it came from like the name of the factory where they first made them, which is wild.
Well,
That's where
that makes sense.
Yeah, it was like, I'm not even going to try and pronounce it, but it started with a J. It was like the name of the factory and it ended in Staller, and they became Tullers for short.
Anyways,
but then of course later we'll get to the double entendre with Taller that I was desperately trying to figure out and could not find the German word that made it make sense.
Oh, okay. All right. This is, you've got a note that I don't have, so that's delightful.
Okay.
Anyways, peasant sells his cow. Where now we can get past the first sentence of the story. On his walk back home, he sees some frogs croaking, and I'm guessing the translated word for 8 makes a better frog noise. But
Right.
they're ribbiting and they're going, according to this, ache, ache, ache. And the peasant assumes, as one does, that that they are trying to say the number 8. He yells at them a bit that he only got 7 for the cow. Then to prove the point, he throws his money into the pond and says, count it and then come back. But these were just regular frogs, unfortunately for him. And they were not kings in disguise. So they just kept ribbiting. And the dude didn't get his money back, yelled at him a bit more, finally dips off back home without
I think
his...
this guy was stupider than the guy who was trying to learn fear.
Yeah.
Who knows?
Well, this guy,
Yeah.
I think is mostly stupid throughout, but we'll get to
I
it.
think so too.
Yeah. Next day, as is proven with this next paragraph, next day goes and buys another cow with the idea that he can slaughter it, butcher it up, make some money that way. And on the way to town, he meets a pack of dogs, and the dogs bark at him, and he correctly assumes that they would like to eat all the beef, but he incorrectly assumes that they work for the butcher, and that if he just leaves them unattended with the cow meat, they'll eat a little bit, but then they'll bring the bulk of the meat to the butcher, who will buy the meat from him, which, if I'm being honest, is the opposite of what happens at a butcher shop. Generally speaking, that's where the confusion is. See, butchers sell the meat. And
Well, they have to get the meat from somewhere.
well, the meat they do buy, I assume they have a regular guy.
Like probably, but like I could see if someone came with like, I got this whole cow, I'll give you a good deal, and then you can chop it up and sell it
Right.
for parts.
I think that's what a
You
butcher's
know.
job is.
Right.
Yeah.
So like I
This
could
guy.
see him bringing one whole cow and being like, sure, but
Which, I mean, but you
the
gotta...
dogs are not in his employ.
No, the dogs are not in his ploy. We find this out. Yeah. So
After a lengthy conversation
yeah,
with the dogs.
after a
Not
conversation
every
with
creature in Grimm's is actually, anthropomorphic and speaks.
what happens instead is the peasant leaves, the dogs eat the meat. He goes back 3 days later looking for his money. The butcher is like, what money? What cow? The peasant says, well, I left it with all those dogs, so pay me. And the butcher's like, are the dogs in the room with you now? Ultimately, after some arguing, the butcher does not wish to pay this stranger, talking about, please pay me for the meat I gave to some dogs. The peasant, he's so
when you
upset
put
at
it
this.
that way.
Yeah. That he immediately makes a meeting with the king, tells him the story, and sitting next to him is his daughter, of course, who hears all this, and she laughs. King is like, well, I can't make a butcher pay for the meat that you gave to the dogs, but you made my daughter laugh, and she never laughs normally, and I promised to wed her to a dude that could make her laugh. And there we have like the standard of all these stories, which is kind of an idiot gets rewarded despite himself, but completes a task, gets a princess. So here we are again. Yes,
Rewarded with a woman.
rewarded with a woman.
Yeah.
Who, with no name.
Or agency.
Because she's not really a person, obviously.
But the Shyamalanian twist is he does not get it, because the peasant's like, first of all, I already got a wife, and second of all, she's a huge bitch, and it's like whenever I'm with her, it's like I have 4 wives just screaming at me. So I don't need your daughter. King's mad.
To pause for a second.
Okay,
Can you
yeah, by
imagine
all
being
means.
this guy's wife?
Oh my God, no! What a freaking
What happened to the
moron.
money
Poor
you
luck
made
for
from the
her.
cow? I threw it
some
at the
frogs.
frogs. They refused to count it and give it back.
again, she had no say back then, so she couldn't like just take charge and do it herself
No.
because
No,
this is like clearly some learned helplessness BS here from this dude, but
although,
she
I
couldn't
mean,
do anything.
who's more foolish? Who's stupider? The stupid guy or the woman that marries the stupid? Maybe it was an arranged marriage.
Well, I was gonna
Yeah.
say, you think she got any say in that? She was probably sold to him for 7 goats or something.
You know what happened? She was probably alone in the woods. Her father was a woodcutter. She lost the ability to speak because a fairy took it from her, and then someone came along and was like, "Hey, you hungry? You want to marry me? I'll give you some food." But anyway, all right. So I can't marry, but I'm besides I'm married, so I can't marry your daughter. And they kind of go back and forth a little bit. The king says, finally, listen, come back in 3 days and I'll give you 500. Peasant doesn't ask 500 of what, but he's like, great, see you in 3 days. As he's leaving, the soldier at the gate asks him for some of the money. The peasant promises some money to the gatekeeper. And then and then a Jew overheard all of that. I was like, whoa, what? What? I mean, obviously there's Jewish people around, but it felt very much so that this story was taking a different turn.
Yeah.
I felt it right then and there.
This was not going to be a person of the Jewish faith.
No. This wasn't
so much as
a caricature.
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly. I don't even know how to go on from here because the character is just a Jew throughout the whole thing. I feel weird saying just so the Jew hears this. I'm gonna say Jewish person. I think that I'm not sure. What do you think, Sasha?
Yeah, I would concur. I think that's better.
Yeah, okay. So a Jewish person over here says he runs up. He's like, all right, bro, listen, you know what? I hear you've got $500 coming to you. I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll work as a money changer for you. I'm going to give you small bits of currency. You're going to get this money in 3 days. So you can pay me the interest in 3 days for, whatever it is. I'll get a little cut. You'll get a bunch of currency right now and smaller bills than these big talers. Peasant shouts out that sounds good. The Jewish guy gives him $300 worth of smaller currency. And then he's going to take his cut. They come back in 3 days. The king's going to give you the large coin. So yeah. 3 days later, everyone comes back to the king. King says, time for your 500, peasant, and they take his coat off. The peasant says, well, not so, my liege, for I have given 200 to the soldier and 300 to the Jewish fella. So in walks the two of them. King's like, okay, then distribute the 500 accordingly. Except 'twas not tailors, but instead just lashings the whole time. So the soldier took it like a man, but the Jewish fella whimpered at being beaten on and said, oh, these are hard tailors. And that made the king laugh. But for whatever reason, he tells the peasant, well, that was all grand fun. Tell you what, peasant, go to my treasure room and take whatever treasure you want. And to the soldier and the Jewish fella, nothing. Like they're the ones that got beaten, and they're the ones that made the king laugh. The Jewish guy made the king laugh, and he didn't get to go to the treasure room. But peasant goes and stuffs his pockets, goes to an inn and starts counting. The Jewish guy follows behind him, and the peasant starts trash talking the king to whoever wants to listen. The Jewish guy overhears him, and he's like, shit, he's talking trash about the king. I better go tell the king. So he does. King gets mad and says, well, go bring the peasant here. Peasant, when he hears this, though, he says, look, I can't go see the king in my old coat because I've got all this money now. But the Jewish guy is scared that he's taking too much time. He's going to get in trouble. He says, look, I'll give you a nice coat, okay? You can borrow my coat. Gives him his coat off his back. And the two go back to the king. King's like, this Jewish guy said you were trash talking me. Is that true? And the peasant says, certainly not. And you can tell he's lying because he's a Jew. As we all know, Jews always lie. And not only that, but he's going to start talking about that he lent me his coat. But again, please remember that Jewish people always lie. And the king says, yeah, well, that's a good point. And at any rate, one of you must be lying. So I'm going to have the Jew whipped again. And then he whips the Jewish guy while the peasant dips back home with his treasure, plus whatever the small coins that the Jewish guy had given him the day before, the payday loan, plus the dude's coat. And then on his way home, the peasant says, well, that worked out fine for me. That was quite a good bargain. The end.
Wow.
There's a lot there.
There's a lot there. A lot to talk about.
There's a lot to talk about. Does anyone have an idea for what they think the moral of this story is?
I mean, I think the Grimm brothers think it's never trust a Jew.
Well, kinda. But like,
But also, if you screw one over, it'll work out for you. Don't worry.
maybe that might be more of it. Because like from our perspective, though, the Jewish guy did nothing wrong. So
No.
yeah, all the Jewish guy did was the usury, the payday loan. And that's a fairly classic like
Trope. I mean, hello, Merchant of Venice.
yeah,
The
hello,
story is
Merchant of
very
Venice.
much giving Merchant of Venice.
Hello, the Harry Potter stories where they
Oh yeah,
have
Gringotts. All the goblins are clearly Jewish.
yeah,
Yeah.
with they're like, look at these little men with their hooked nose and they love gold. But I mean, of course, talk about someone who's
Yeah.
problematic.
Subtle.
Yeah.
J.K. Rowling.
Oh,
Subtle.
J.K. Yeah, that's certainly what J.K. Rowling is known for is her subtlety. I had one moral: don't snitch,
Yeah, I
because
mean, ultimately, the Jew snitching is what gets him beaten the second time, right?
that's the second time, and the
Yeah.
first beating was like a little bit of like grim, as it were, trope too. Is like, you didn't ask, you didn't know it was
Right.
500 lashings. It's
Right.
not until he snitches that he's like, yeah, well, we can't trust anyone, I guess. But
I was very amused by the snitching was specifically, at least in this translation you guys sent me, was that the peasant had called the king a rascal. And I was like,
oh
how is
my,
this a thing? They're so offended by a rascal. Like, who cares? It's like, oh, cute little rascal. And then I looked up the etymology and it was like, oh, now I get why he was so offended, because the origins are that it's like this French word and it means like low class of the streets. Like,
Ooh.
yeah.
So
I was
one
like,
thing we've talked about before is that at this point in Germany, they were pretty much owned by the French. It's funny because the version that Phil and I have uses the word rogue instead of rascal.
yeah.
interesting.
There's got to
But
be
either
some
way, I'm sure there's
etymological.
something. Yeah, there's something to that too. But the fact that it's like a French rooted word, and also that it means like, boy, has the meaning of that word changed over time. Because, I mean,
Well,
according to online etymology dictionary, it used to mean people of the lowest class, the general mass, rabble, or foot soldiers of an army.
oh, and we can't have that for the king.
You can't have that for the king. Low, tricky, dishonest person.
Arn Thompson, type 1642. You'll be surprised to learn, or maybe not. It's the only specific type of this story.
What?
I was thinking that it had a very high number on the index for that. I was like, it must be because it's the only one.
It's the only
Or
one.
like
Yeah.
one of two or something.
One thing that grabbed me was the onomatopoeia. I think onomatopoeia with translations is always interesting for me. I think the frogs with the Ike or Ike, and in German it would be oct.
Oct.
So I like that makes more sense. I'm very curious what the dogs were on about, because at least in our version they were going wow 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 wow.
Yeah.
Which
Oh.
vaguely sounds like a dog sound, like bow wow wow, but
Bow wow. Yeah.
In one of them, they said, bow wow, what now?
I don't think that was in our version.
No, it was somewhere else that I don't know. I
Yeah.
started looking around the internet, and in one version it was bow wow, what now? Which again just made me think about how stupid this guy is.
But yeah,
Like, why would you think that's what the dogs were saying?
I like the fact that we didn't even get like a what now from the dogs. Like from our dogs, it was wow wow wow, but it was like, okay, that's just a dog noise, which is fine, but it meant that the frogs were just ribbiting. The dogs were just barking. They saw like, when he went back to his wife, he didn't even have the excuse. He was like, oh well, they were talking dogs at least. I say that, I think that maybe she wasn't a bitch. I think
I'm sure she wasn't.
I think all she did was occasionally question. He's like, I went and sold the cow, and she's like, oh, that's great, that's good, we can buy some food. And he said, well, how much you sell the cow for? Well, $7. And she's like, well, that's fantastic. I'm gonna use one of these talers. I'm gonna buy a pot of fat. And then we're gonna redo the living room because and the bathroom, because the bathtub where it is, it's and he's like, well, hold on a second, wife.
slow your roll.
I don't actually have the money. I
Here's why-
had the money. I sold it for that much. I didn't say I kept the money.
What happened was I got into an argument with some frogs. And it's Germany. She might even have said, well, were they magic frogs? And he was like, no, because there's a lot of them around. So at least I would get it. Like, if you got tricked by a magic frog, in Germany in the early 1800s.
And it
That's
does
just not
happen.
even your fault. Yeah, that's just what happens.
It happens a lot,
Yeah.
or wolves or whoever, like these animals, they're tricksy. If I saw a talking squirrel and the talking squirrel was like, I'll show you something magic, I would 100% follow that squirrel, even if I got tricked at the end. And I went to my wife afterwards, and I was like, the squirrel said he was magic, he could talk, so I followed him, and then it all went to hell. But I think my wife would get it.
She would understand. That's
Yeah.
perfectly reasonable.
No, these weren't even talking animals. Well, I guess in some translations maybe they were. That gives them a little bit of.
I mean, it seems like even the way it's written, they weren't really talking. It's very clear that the man was just an idiot.
Yeah.
You hear what you want to hear.
That's right.
And what he heard was lies from Jews. He's just like, here's a sucker. Yeah, all right. You're gonna give me $300 worth of change? Sure. Yeah, I'll be back in 3 days. But
Oh yeah,
Eddie,
so I did feel like the double entendre with the taller.
tell me that double
'Cause
entendre.
again, I don't know if this was just my translation, but like at the very end, it seemed as though the king said, right, again, he paid the Jew out in hard thalers. And that time it had an H in it. I thought maybe it was like a German double entendre for lashings. And so that it worked like even on that level as well. Do you know what I'm saying?
There's so
But
many
still.
weird like things with translation that
Yeah,
we miss out on. And especially if not entendres, then like plays on words or expressions from the year 1820, or
exactly.
that we just don't get. What was it?
The Wolf and the Seven Kids.
Wolf and the Seven Kids. There's a thing where like the wolf wants to make his voice sweeter, so he goes and eats a bunch of chalk. And
Ew.
both Mike and I were like, what on earth does that even mean? Like, what is, I don't know. I can make up an expression.
Can't
but
trust
like
a chalk eater. One thing I noticed is that in attempts to clean this up and make it a little less anti-Semitic, they referred to the Jewish fellow as a moneylender
I
instead.
saw that. Yeah.
I saw that they did that, which, if I'm being honest, I feel like the moneylender is it's more like a wink.
I think there's definitely still a wink there.
It's like an if you know, you know.
Yeah. I mean, I guess if you were a kid without having ever studied any of this and just heard a moneylender, you might not make the connection. But with, I mean, almost minimal paying attention, that this is clearly a Jewish person, because Christians were using them. We're using Jewish people to do usuries because banks needed to. That's the only way that banks work, is if you loan out money on interest.
Right. Otherwise, they'd all just collapse.
Well, yeah. Then it's not a bank. It's
Right.
it's just like some dude's
It's
house.
just people lending each other money.
Yeah, it's like, yeah, okay, yeah, you can keep your money at my house. I promise not to spend it. Well, okay.
Yeah.
Well, anyways, so I don't know if we've solved racism
Anti-Semitism.
and anti-Semitism by discussing this story, but here's my final thoughts. It's a bad story. It seems to take a plot-ish thing from a bunch of other stories and then just throws some anti-Semitism in at the end for fun. And I think that's where the problem. There's a lot of problems with this, but I think that the problem of just like it's always the peasant's perspective, and the Jewish person just kind of wanders in and he just abuses them for a little while and then ends up rich because of it. So Sasha, I think you were right. Like fuck around with Jewish people and you'll end up on top.
Yeah. Well, I mean, clearly the Jewish person wasn't. It was the Jew, so not even a person as far as the Grimm brothers were concerned. So that's why his story doesn't need to be finished. It doesn't matter. He wasn't a person, just like the princess wasn't a person.
And he might as well be a woman.
Yeah. I mean, as a Jewish woman, I'm just.
Oh man, you know what? The only thing you could do worse is be a woodcutter in Germany. Oh,
they can't possibly be below the women and the Jews.
There's a history of woodcutters just being at the bottom of the ladder there. But that may just be Phil's and my reading into it too. It's an ongoing it's an ongoing joke.
Yeah, but it's also an ongoing theme in the stories where they're like, anyways, he was a woodcutter, so he was poor, and he had to sell his daughter.
like
Because
anybody who has to give up their child because they can't afford it is a woodcutter.
Is a woodcutter, yeah.
Sure. Yeah.
That's how
The poor
it goes.
woodcutters still probably outranked the Jew.
Yeah, and women.
And
But
women, for sure.
I digress.
Women aren't people. Again, neither of those were people back then.
I don't think any Jewish people actually have names other than correctly identifying their religion. And yeah, women are just, objet d'art at best.
They're prizes.
Yeah, they're prizes. Like
At
the,
best.
like, oh, you know what? You made my daughter laugh. Great.
Have her.
She's been a sullen bitch this entire time, and I said I'd
Teen,
marry
probably.
her. Yeah.
Right.
Or just,
a sullen teen, or just a teen.
She's a 12-year-old that doesn't want to get married.
Weird.
And
what a bitch.
Oh, yeah. It's so
What a
she's so
terrible
weird.
non-person.
Awful.
Oh, on that subject that we come across constantly, there's a movie called Catherine Called Birdie, which is very nice.
Based on the middle grade books.
Oh, is it? I didn't realize it's based on books.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's
Ask a librarian.
Oh, right. It's Bella Ramsey from Game of Thrones and Last of Us, who is a saucy 14-year-old in Middle England who does not want to get married despite her father's best intentions.
Bella Ramsey.
Yeah, they're really cool.
From the Game of Thrones?
Actually.
She was a minor character in Game of Thrones, and then they kept her on because she was so popular.
Oh, wait. Okay. They now? Are they? Is the actor?
Yeah, Bella Ramsey uses they them pronouns, but in Game of Thrones, the character was female, and she was the little girl that was like the queen of her realm or whatever. The like
Bear Island.
Yes, Bear Island.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
That was Bella Ramsey. Yeah.
But yeah, no, Catherine Called Birdie was quite entertaining.
Okay,
we liked it. Speaking of
I haven't watched it, but I heard it was good.
Yeah, speaking of young women getting married off against their will with no agency
will and
whatsoever.
better judgment.
I mean, how many stories are there like that, right? I mean, what's the Brave Merida?
That was, I guess, the deconstruction of that trope was she didn't want to get married, and then it just turned. I mean, I liked Brave.
I loved Brave, but it's just, again, it starts at least with that same premise, right?
Yeah. I don't mind deconstructing the premise, though. But yeah. I mean, certainly. I mean, it's enough of a trope that's the whole point. I'm not adding anything to the conversation.
Welcome to my night.
Oh, you can talk about how what was the name of those books again? You can talk about how they're, was it US books or something?
Oh, Usborne.
Sasha, there's a company called Usborne. Mike has talked to me about it on several of these podcasts.
It's like Tupperware parties, but for kids' books.
So instead of the Scholastic Book Fair, you do it at someone's house.
Yeah.
Oh no!
But it's like
is it like an MLM for books?
I don't know the structure of it per se, but the books are great. Like we got a lot of these great story collections, like padded covers, so they're chunky enough for little ones to flip through. We get some really good stuff out of that. As a result, both my kids were fascinated with Macbeth.
Yeah.
Nice.
And I should mention, of course, that we are not sponsored by Usborne Books.
Not yet.
Or at this point, anyway.
Not yet.
If we keep talking about them,
maybe that'll be your first sponsor.
Well, we can talk about sponsorships later. Okay. I think we can probably. I think we've gone through as much of this as we can go through. Sasha, thank you so much for doing this, and we'd love to have you back at some point if you had fun.
Thanks for having me. I would be happy to come back.
This has been story number 7, The Good Bargain. Sleep tight, and we'll see you next time.
Good evening.
Bye.